Okay. So for those of you who said group by, so why not group by and why where? So the question asks which clause is used to filter results and select the same. Yeah. So we said that whenever not sorting, but we are grouping rows of data, right? For example, we group by department to find salaries of employees, for example, in each department. But where is just to filter the results. For example, you want to just see those students whose grade is greater than, for example, 90, right? In that case, not the students. You will not see students who receive lower than 90, but only like filtering results based on this condition. Okay. Like this happy smiley face. Who is the smiley face today? Nice. Okay. So keep smiling. What will happen if you run these from students? These are really easy questions. Okay, so what will happen if you delete from students? Delete all the student records, thanks to 17 answered correctly. So 5 of you said delete the student table, delete columns, etc. We don't write table, right? This is not the correct syntax. So the student is table, so you just write delete from table name, right? And delete only null records. It doesn't delete only null records. Oh, and so what's wrong with this one? Delete the student table, delete columns, keys, index, etc. So this is for drop, right? So we said that when you use a DDL command like drop, it changes the structure. For example, if you are dropping a table, it means that the table doesn't exist anymore. So there is no index, no primary key, no foreign key, and so on. But if you are just deleting from a table, it means that you are removing the data, but you still have the structure of the table. So you have, for example, a table like this, right? Let's say this is a student ID, this is course ID, this is grade, this is enrollment table. So if that's the case, and you delete from the, for example, enrollment table, right? Then this will be the result. So you have a table which is empty, but you still have the table, primary keys, indexes, foreign keys, and so on. And so this is not correct. Delete only null records is obviously not correct. Remove table structure but keep the records. How is that even possible? I really like that one person who answered this. I don't want you to tell me who you are, but thank you. Okay. A is the highest finance here. Next. What will this SQL query do? Select department number, count the star from staff, group by department number. So we have select department number, count the star from staff, group by department number. So we had this example a lot. So I assumed everyone answered correctly, which I was wrong. Count all staff in the staff table. what if you want to actually do that? Oh, sorry. Sorry to all those students who will watch this recording. They will be like become deaf. Okay, so if we want to count all the staff in the staff table, what do you write? We don't need the group by, right? We can just do it with the count the star. And so the first answer is not correct. The second, count staff in each department, that's correct because we group by department number, which means that we will have a table with here department, right? And which are grouped by department. So for example, we have department D10 and then number of employees, right? Whatever it is, like 20 employees. D20, for example, 30 employees, and so on. So we don't have repeated department number here. Count unique department numbers. Why this is not correct? Count unique department numbers. Because we are selecting from the staff table, right? So staff table is the employee table. So counting the star from the staff table, giving you the number of staff, right? Not the number of employees, not the number of departments. Count all non-null staff titles, not null or non-null, okay? Okay, good. So whether rows is more than what does the having clause do? You remember having, and I compared having with by? Okay. Sort query results. What is the clause that sorts the query results? If I, for example, want to sort the result of, let's say, I want to get a salary of employees in each department, sorted by, for example, a salary from highest to lowest. So what do you use? Order by, right? So order by sorts the results in ascending or descending order, which way that we define, right? And limits the number of results. Does having limits the number of results? Filter rows before grouping. What does filter rows before grouping? How do we filter rows before? So you remember when we were talking about having, I mentioned, because some people may confuse having with where, right? Where also filter the results, having also filter the results, so why should we bother having another clause? And I mentioned having is if you want to have further conditions or further filtering after grouping your data. So whenever you have a group by, right, although you can use having without group by too, but I mean it is as a filtering and conditioning is adding more conditions after you group your data, okay? For example, we had an example when we grouped by, for example, the departments, and then we said we wanted the salary of employees in each department, but only those departments that have more than a specific number of employees, right? In that case, we are actually grouped by department, but then we want to also have only those departments, not all the departments, but only those departments that have, for example, more than, let's say, 50 employees. And in that case, if these are my departments, and if I'm using having, for example, number of employees more than 50, then the result will be only this one, right? Is this clear? Next. This is on fire today. Who is Sissy? Good. Which of the following commands will return only unique values?
So let's just think different values. Don't include repeated.
I really like every time that I see a question, I think, okay, this is really easy, everyone will answer, maybe I had to change it. Some of you never disappoint me. Thank you. So please, for those 7 people selected, select distinct values. Do we have such thing? No, right? So we only have select distinct, not select distinct values, so we don't have distinct. Select unique. But I'm happy that no one selected select exclusive. What is the result of this flip? Update employees, set salary multiplied by 2, where employee ID is 101. So we are updating the employee table, right? But what update exactly? We are setting this column, the column salary. Let's say we have something like this here. So we have employee ID and salary, right? And then we have employee ID 101, 102, 103, and so on. The salary here is 100K, here is 100K, it's 900K, and so on. So what it says update employee, right? Set the salary and multiply by 2. So that is the updated result, but only their employee ID is 101. So that is why in the one of the first questions where it was asking about the where clause, we said where feature the results, right? So not only updating all the rows, but only where the salary is 100K. So the updated result is 200, right? So this is what is done. And okay, so increase salary of all employees. No, it was only if we didn't have there, right? So this is not correct. Return error. Okay, this one is to calculate the 1 second. Which SQL query finds the total sales per product? So the first one, what is the problem with this one? Select product ID, sales from orders, group by product ID. What does it do? What does the first query do? We want the sum of sales, right? We ask for the total sales per product. So we have to provide product ID and sum of total sales for each product. Select product ID sum of sales from order. We didn't use group by. Select product ID sales from order. We didn't use group by for the aggregate functions, right? Which query finds departments in the staff table with more than 10 employees? This is an example of the staff table, right? We have employee ID, for example, yellow.
I was thinking about that. Oh, this is from staff and
Okay, good. So let's see what each one does. So
I was thinking about that, but was it?
the first one, select department ID from staff, where count star greater than 10, group by department ID. So what does this query do? So we are in the staff table, right? Where we have like these employees and some other information, like for example, which department they are, and we want to find the departments that have more than 10 employees. So if you remember, if you want to find, for example, if you look at the blue query, select department ID from staff, group by department ID. So because we are in the staff table, right, we first have to group by department ID, right? Because department ID here in the staff table can be repeated, right? For example, we can have 2 employees working in the same department. So if we want to find the department, if our result, we want our result to be something like this. Departments with more than 10 employees. So there should be a table. So your result should look like a table, like for example, department ID, right? B10, B15, B20, and so on, with the number of employees, count of employees, but only those departments that have more than 10 employees. So always, if you're confused or if you're not sure which answer is correct or how to write the query, think about what your result should look like. Okay, so try to answer the question. If you cannot write the SQL query, try to answer the question with the result that you think that should look like, right? So having this question, even if you don't know the SQL query, you know that your result should be something like this: the list of departments, maybe number of employees, right? But only for those departments that have more than 10 employees. For example, here you only have to see something like this, right? But not for example, right? Because we want more than 10 employees. All right. So that's why we need group by, right? Because in this table, because it's a staff table, even if I'm not giving you a staff table here, you know that in the staff table, what is the unique? What is the unique column in the staff table? What is the primary key? Department ID in the staff table? Employee ID, right? For example, if you're talking about the student table, a student ID is unique, right? Not there, for example, course. But of course, if you're talking about the course table, then the course ID or the course code is a unique identifier, right? Because Each table, if you remember, is representing an entity in your ER model, right? And in each entity, we had a unique identifier, which could become like a foreign key in other table. For example, if you are talking about the course entity or the course table, the unique identifier is the course ID, right? Because this table, the course table, is representing all the information for each courses. And if you're talking about the student table, then the student ID is unique. Now that we are talking about the staff table, right? The staff ID or employee ID is your unique identifier and not the department, right? Because we can have 2 or more employees working in the same department. So obviously, department ID cannot be a unique identifier in the staff table. So now that we want to have a result like this, right? We cannot have a repeated department ID. It doesn't make sense. So your result is not like this, right? Like department ID, let's say B10, 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 B15. So does it make sense? No. You want a result showing this number of employees for each department, but also with more condition, right? You can start from the simplified version, forget about the condition with more than 10 employees, and let's say you want to only see the department's number of employees in each department, right? Based on the staff table. So if you want to see only the number of employees in each department, you know that you have to group by the departments. But now that you have more condition, that is, we don't want to see the number of employees for all the departments. You want to see the number of employees only for departments that have more than, for example, 10 employees, right? In that case, your result should look like something like this. Department 10, for example, 20 employees, department 15 employees, and if there is a department with less than 10 employees, you don't want to see this. So you have to group by department, and after you use group by, or after aggregation, you are having a condition. That's why you're using having, right? So that's the difference between having and where. So where comes before aggregation, so that's a filtering before aggregation, but having is after aggregation. And select department ID from employees group by department ID where count star greater than 10. We don't use where after group by, okay? So because this is after the aggregation, right? So where always comes before, whereas having always comes after. Select department ID from employees where count star is greater than 10. What is the problem with this query? Yeah, not group by, and where you can use aggregate functions. That's not here, right? So the correct answer is select department from staff, group by department ID, right? So now that we have the number of employees for each department, we only want to show those that have more than 10 employees, right? So we use having. And last question. Which query finds departments where the average salary is above something? Nice. Again, so please pay attention to what I mentioned because it's more parameters in your questions, okay? There is a reason that I mentioned it. For example, this question asks which query finds the departments where average salary is above 50K. So we are not talking about the department table, right? I specifically mentioned salary is in the staff table. So if you remember those two tables, staff and organization tables in the example that I used in class, we have salary in the staff table. So we have a staff table like this, for example, employee ID, department, salary, and some other information, right? And then we had organization table with department ID, department name, and division, and some other information about the departments, right? But the salary was only in the staff table. So now we want to find the departments where the average salary is about 50,000. So we have a table like this, we have a salary, right? And now we want to find the average salary for each department. So if you look at this table, you can realize immediately, just reading the question, that you are going to use aggregate functions average, right? Because you have the salary, but the question asks you to find average salary, right? So you are going to use aggregated functions average. You are also going to use group by, right? Because the question asks you to find the average salary for each department, but the department is repeated in the staff table. So we have to group by to make this like unique, right? So now we want to have, again, if you cannot write the query as I mentioned, just try to imagine or write the answer that you expect. So I expect an answer like this. So I would expect something like this. It asks departments. So I want department ID. Where the average salary, so I also want to see average salary, right? Is above something. So I want to see, for example, B10, B15, B20, and so on. Right? In this resulting table, I want to see like these departments, like distinct departments, right? So that's why we are using group by, right? So this is the group by part. So the group by, right? Group rows of data based on shared instances of data in that column, which is department ID here. So now we have the salary in department, for example, D10 for this employee. We have, for example, the salary in the same department for all other employees as well, right? So basically we have the salary of all employees in this department. We only have to get the average salary. So we want to select, right? Let's only have average salary for now. So these are the parts that I assume you should be able to immediately write, okay? So this is not your struggle. Select from which table? If the question asks salary is in the staff table, right? So we know that you're selecting from the staff table. The question asks average salary, which is like really easy to just write average salary here, right? So up to here, everyone should write this part, right? Now, departments where the average salary is above 50K, and we said we don't have unique departments in the staff table, right? So we have to use also the group by. Group by what? Department, right? So this will give you something like that. So grouping the based on the department. Also finding the average salary for this. But we also have more conditions, right? Now, the condition is their average salary is above 50,000, right? What should I use? Having, right? Because it's after aggregation or after using the data. So in this case, you write your condition here, having where the average salary is having average salary above, for example. So is this clear? What other column can I include in the select part of my statement? Can I have select department name or employee ID? As a hint, I'm using group by department ID. Okay. So when I ask you, can I include, let's say, employee ID in my select statement? If you don't know the answer, doesn't matter. Just imagine you have employee ID here. Okay. So as I mentioned before, when you don't know the answer, just imagine what the result should look like. That's easy, right? So if I'm going to write select average salary and employee ID, right? So this is average salary, and this is employee ID. So for average salary, I know what to write because this is B10. We have 100K, 150, so the average is 125, right? And the same for other departments. Now for employee ID, what should I write? There are many employees working in this department, right? Can I write employee ID, 101, 102? Can I write this? No, this is not a relational table. This is against the atomicity of the relational tables, right? That's why we cannot include employee ID in the select part of the statement where we group by department ID, right? Can I write department ID here? Can I write department ID? Yes. And even if you don't know if you have to write department ID or not, you just try the result, right? You can imagine you have department ID here, which we have actually, right? And we can write it because we are actually grouping by the department ID. Can I write the count of employees? Yes, I cannot write employee ID here because there are more than one employee working in each department, right? So I don't know, I cannot write employee ID 101, 102. That I cannot write, but I can write the count of employees, right? Or count star in this case, because we star is selecting from the staff table, gives you the number of employees, right? So count of employees is, for example, 2 in this department, 1 in this department, 1 in this department. Is that clear? So this is all you have to know. So you basically have to, for your exam, you have to know where to write, what to actually first. What are the main clauses that we learned, right? Select from, by, order by, having, etc. And what each one do. For example, select just gives you or identifies which column we want to represent in the result. So if I write select average salary and department ID, so my result will look like this. Department ID and average salary. From identifies from which table or tables you want to collect data from. So in this case, we are only selecting from the staff table because everything that we want exists in the staff table. If not, if the information we want exists in more than one table, what should we do? Join. We join tables, right? Using? Yes, but using what? We can join tables? How can we join tables? Foreign keys, right? That's how you link the entities in your ER model. So entities become your tables, right? And the keys, foreign keys, still relating those tables. Now, we also have where clause where you specify your conditions or filter the rows of your data. Filter the rows, not the columns, okay? Because, for example, if I say selecting only the employees whose salary is above 100K, right? Then you use where. Where, for example, salary is greater than 100K. and this filter your result. That means it only shares some part of your result, not all. And we also have group by. Group by is grouping your data, similar to what I explained here, right? Order by sorts the data. For example, we want to order by salary in ascending order, right? Then order by salary, and then if you don't specify anything, default is ascending. If not, you just write ascending. And we also had having, which is similar to where clause. The only difference is that where filter the rows of your data in the original table before grouping, but having is additional condition where filter the rows of data after you group your data. That's what happens. And aggregate functions, we often use them with group by, not always. We can use, for example, select count star from employees without using the group by, right? We can use aggregate functions without using group by, but we mostly use them with group by. For example, average salary, sum of sale, and so on. And so I think I've reviewed almost all the clauses. Yes, you had a question.
Do you expect us to write these queries in the final, or are they going to be in multiple choice?
I will, most of them is similar to your, okay, so for your, we don't have any SQL part, right? Okay, so for your final exam, most of the questions look like what you have in your quizzes or Kahoots, right? So I give you multiple choice questions or true false. So I either give you a query in the question asking you what the query does in a multiple choice question, or I ask a question, give several queries, and ask you which query is correct. So this is for the majority of questions. But of course, I also give you problem solving. In the problem solving part, I give you a few questions to write the queries. Now, because this course is not a lab test, and in general, I do not believe students should write codes on papers, but I also assume that you should be able to write simple queries, right? At least as much as I explained in class, and then writing also on the board many times, so you should be able to do the same in exam. So the difficulty level would be the same as examples that we covered in class. Like, for example, using group by, order by, aggregate functions, or what similar to what you had in your assignment 2 or your final project, joining like 2 or 3 tables using group by, order by. So this is the most complex example. But that will only, I think, I haven't prepared the questions yet, but it's basically, I think, mostly 60%. I guess multiple choice and true false questions, 40% for problem solving, or maximum 50-50. So that's, but it's either 50-50 or 60-40. And let's see what's the result.
Oh, otherwise, because I'm going to sleep. No.
Today, I'm gonna kill you.
Because I haven't seen us, I haven't worked.